design video. I'm Steph and this is week 2 of the One Room Challenge. We're going to attempt shiplap again here in my bathroom. If you saw our video on how to shiplap the ceiling, we learned quite a few things we would have done differently. And of course it may be easier to actually paint the shiplap if it was true shiplap, but we are using utility ply that we've cut down to size. So, you know, there are those variables as well. But I just want to show you here, it is just about 1/8 of an inch thickness here. So what we plan to do this time around to hopefully get, you know, good results. We got good results before, but hopefully this time we'll get them quicker because we wasted a lot of time on that ceiling. But we plan to paint all of these side edges first, and then what we're going to do is paint the wall navy first. Then we don't have to try to paint inside each of the little grooves because that's where the problem really came from. So right now we're going to paint the wall, then we'll start painting the shiplap.
Now initially I wrestled with the thought of wasting paint since we were going to cover up the majority of the wall, but on the other hand I knew it would be much quicker to paint the wall itself rather than trying to paint inside each of the grooves of the shiplap boards. So overall, I'm grateful for taking this preliminary step. It only took 15 minutes to completely paint both sides of the bathroom. And yes, while it may be wasteful use of paint, it was most definitely worth the time it saved in the long run. So I didn't do anything really fancy here other than mask off the surrounding walls and the ceiling with a little frog tape and applied the blue paint.
For this accent wall, we are going to use utility ply as our shiplap because we're doing everything very budget friendly. Because of that though, it is very thin. The edges are not as smooth as a true shiplap board would be. So we are going to paint the edges of the boards before installation just to save ourselves some time and headache. And that's also why we painted the accent wall before installation as well, so that we don't have to paint inside the grooves after installation because that was a pain in the butt. So just to remind you, we did do this same material on our ceiling in our living area downstairs, and so you can go watch that video to see how we did that.
To easily paint the edges of the shiplap boards, we stacked them on top of one another, and then we were able to paint them all at the same time. So we used just a simple little paintbrush for this and just applied our paint. We only needed one coat to apply the color. More importantly, after you have painted the edges, you'll want to carefully look at each individual board and smooth out any areas where the paint may have pooled. If you miss this step or avoid it, you'll find ridges of dried paint after the fact, and you'll just have to sand them smooth later. So take the extra minute or two to just go over each board individually and smooth out any wet paint that has pooled with your paintbrush.
Before we install our shiplap, we are going to take our stud finder and mark where the studs are on the wall so we know exactly where to secure it. And then we're using our big level to draw a line down so we have it all the way down the wall.
The stud placement can easily be marked with a pencil like I did here, or since we were using just a normal pencil on a dark wall, it was kind of hard to see. You could also run a piece of painter's tape down that line as well, and the painter's tape is the same width as a stud as well. So that is actually not a bad idea, so then you'll know exactly where to drive your brads. The actual installation of the shiplap wall is probably the easiest part of this whole process, and a wall is much easier than a ceiling too. It's just difficult to work over your head for long amounts of time, so working on a wall is much easier just for that fact alone. So what you'll want to do is align the first board into position at the top of the wall where it meets the ceiling, and then make sure to use a level just to make sure that the entire shiplap design will be installed straight, and then you'll want to secure the board with 2-inch brads. We have brads with our pneumatic brad nailer, and if you're securing the brads into the studs, it should be nice and secure. You shouldn't need any liquid nails. We did use liquid nails on our shiplap ceiling because the joists were running the opposite directions that we installed our wood, so the liquid nails is really what held that into place. But in this scenario, we just needed to apply the brads into the studs, and then where the boards meet up together, if there were not any studs to drive the brads into at that point, we would just use a little bit of liquid nails to hold the edges down. Now when you get to electrical outlets or light fixtures, it may seem intimidating to cut the wood around those areas, but it really doesn't have to be hard if you have the right tools. So use a measuring tape to obtain accurate dimensions. Then you'll want to plot the dimensions on the board using a pencil and a speed square. Now using the speed square is really crucial because it will make sure your markings are transferred accurately while remaining square. And then for the ease of making these cuts, you'll want access to a couple of tools. The straight cuts that will be made for the outlets, we used a jigsaw. You can also use a multi-tool. And for the circle shape we cut for the light fixture, we used a rotary saw. So just make sure you have the right tools on hand, and this step should go smoothly. We'll also put links in the description below for the specific tools that we used if you need to grab your own. After the shiplap wall has been installed, you're ready to complete the finish work. So the first thing we did was caulk around all the edges of the shiplap, the sides of the walls and the ceiling, and then we used putty to fill in the holes from the brads. Once the putty has dried completely, you can lightly sand them smooth, and then finally you'll want to take a damp washcloth and just remove any dust from the wall. The final task is to paint the shiplap. So over our many years of painting experience, we have come to use this technique, which always results in perfect crisp edges without any bleeding. So the first thing you'll want to do is apply frog tape at the walls and the ceiling. Then you'll want to cut in with the surrounding wall color and allow to dry. This coat of paint is essentially what we like to call the bleed coat. Any paint that bleeds under the tape at this point will match the surrounding walls. Once that has dried, you'll cut in with the accent wall color and paint the remaining wall space. Since we painted the walls and edges of the boards prior to installation, the grooves didn't need to be painted, but just for peace of mind, I did use a brush to apply one coat of paint on the front surface of each grooved area prior to rolling. And finally, you'll want to remove the frog tape while the paint is still wet. And that's it! Taking the time to paint the bleed coat will result in perfect crisp edges every single time. So I am so happy with the results. Navy is my current obsession right now, and this is the perfect shade, Pale Navy by Benjamin Moore. And I can also confidently admit that I am 100% grateful for the ease of this project compared to installing our shiplap ceiling. These tips really made this whole process go so much more smoothly and saved a ton of time in the long run. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up to help support our channel, and subscribe if you haven't already. And be sure to check back next Thursday for week 3 of the One Room Challenge. And as always here at Sunnyside Design, we hope to bring your home to the sunny side of the street.